The tragedy took just moments to unfold, but the fight for justice in the Hillsborough Stadium disaster took 27 long years. Today, at an inquest, jurors found that 96 Liverpool football fans who were crushed to death at a match in Sheffield, England, were unlawfully killed. And police errors, not the behaviour of fans, caused the deaths in 1989.
We unequivocally accept the verdict of unlawful killing and the wider findings reached by the jury in the Hillsborough inquests. On the 15th of April 1989, South Yorkshire Police got the policing of the FA Cup semi-final at Hillsborough catastrophically wrong. It was, and still is, the biggest disaster in British sporting history. That day, 96 people died and the lives of many others were changed forever. The force failed the victims and failed their families.
We're looking at this story from all angles. I'm joined now by Christina MacFarlane from outside the courthouse in Warrington, England. Christina, you've been following the findings as they've been handed down. Finally, some justice for the families of these 96 people killed. Fans have been exonerated.
Well, Lynda, as you speak to me, you can see just behind me that the families of the victims are now returning to court here. They've been speaking in the past hour at a press conference where members of the 22 families spoke up and spoke with incredible poise and eloquence about what they've been through for the past 27 years. I think for many of them it was a cathartic moment where they could say who they were and who they were here representing today, one of the 96 victims that died on April 15th, 1989. They also took the opportunity to remind people that the media, the authorities and the police were complicit in a cover-up, a truth we now know to be true here today, standing outside the courtroom. The fans and the families have been exonerated today on two key crucial points that we learnt this morning. The first was that the 96 victims on that day were unlawfully killed. That's a ruling that was made by the jury here earlier. And question 7, the second issue, which related to the fan actions on that day, the jury found that the fans did not contribute or cause the disaster. Now, both of those findings are the direct opposite of what was found in the original inquest that was heard in 1989 following that disaster. And it's what everyone here has been waiting so long to hear, 27 years. The truth has finally come out.
So, Christina, for the families that you've been speaking to, is this closure for them, or is this just the beginning of the next step to hold those responsible accountable?
Well, I think the emphasis shifts now, Lynda, from the findings that we've heard here today to what happens next. It's important to point out that this is not a criminal proceeding here, so criminal investigations cannot be brought as a result of this inquiry. But for the fans and the families that I'm speaking here today, now that the truth is out, they now want someone to be accountable for this. And there are indications that something of that nature is to follow. We heard from the UK Crown Prosecution Service earlier today saying that they were considering bringing criminal prosecutions as a result of the inquiry today. And we've heard from a number of organisations who were involved in that incident. We've heard from the FA, who've reaffirmed their deep sorrow and regret at the tragic events and said that we must learn from the tragedy. We've heard from the engineering company who were in effect that day, saying that on behalf of the company at the time, we add our deepest sympathies. And perhaps more importantly, we've heard from the South Yorkshire Police, who've been shrouded in controversy for the past 27 years as to their dealings in that day. They issued a statement, but no apology, saying that they accept the verdict of unlawful killing. Now, as I say, this is the verdict that many families have been waiting for, and we had a chance to speak to one key lady, Margaret Aspinall. Her son died in the Hillsborough disaster, and she has been a prominent campaigner for all the families here moving forward, trying to get justice for not only her son, but for the other 95 victims. Here's what she had to say.
For what we've gone through, somebody's got to be held accountable. If I say prosecutions, yes, I think they do need to be prosecuted. For what they put us through, the truth was there for 27 years. We never got that truth. A lot of that's come out in the court over these past 2 years. It's things that we've never seen, we hadn't seen before, and that's what shocked me. And I thought, that has been there. Why wasn't that handed over?
So some closure for some families here today, but for the likes of Margaret Aspinall, who's been campaigning for so long, I don't think this is over yet. And it'll be very interesting to see in the weeks to come whether criminal proceedings are brought.
Following that closely, Christina MacFarlane outside the inquest, thank you very much for following those developments for us. We also have with us our Don Riddell, a CNN sports anchor. Great to have you with us. You've been following this story for such a long time, and this justice today has been a very long time for these families. It's taken a long time for them to get to this point. But there was an inquiry after the disaster. How did this current inquest come about?
Well, that's a long story. How long have you got, Linda? I mean, the families did not want to walk down this road. They said so today. It was never their expectation that it was going to be so painful and so difficult. The initial report, the Taylor report into what had gone on, actually found the police to be largely responsible, and the fans and their behaviour that day was celebrated in the report. But when it came to the actual inquest and the mechanism by which the causes of death were recorded, in 1991, 2 years after the disaster, it came back as accidental death. And the families never accepted that because, in their opinion, this was nothing like an accident. But it has taken them so long to try and get to a point where all the evidence was put on the table. They've had mini inquests, they've had other hearings and investigations. We were talking about one of the campaigners even going to the European Court of Justice, and it took them 25 years to get this inquest. And that was the first point at which all the evidence was on the table. That was the first point at which you had 1,000 witnesses coming to give evidence about what really happened. And basically, roadblock after roadblock was thrown up by the establishment to prevent the families from getting to the bottom of this. And finally, they got there, and it's a great credit to them.